Last time I introduced you to Naomi Krause, a mystic in the town of Covenant, and to the coven that was her found family. Beneath Covenant, 3 unnatural forces were fighting for control, and they were winning. One corrupted soul at a time. Hilda, our coven leader, went to the dark. Mary went to the dark. Alice to the wild. I spent the day warning people, drawing corruption out of them, and trying to keep the coven together. The only glimmer of a safe haven was the town pastor, but even that felt uncertain. By the time night fell, the coven was scattered, and I ended up alone in the forest, desperate, hopeless, begging for answers that wouldn't come. This is day 2. The second day starts, absolutely hopeless and barefoot after an entire night of wandering. And even though Naomi had literally helped prepare the day before, all of this wandering had made her forget that the pastor was giving Sunday morning mass and that the sermon was already happening. So I rush inside and I sit at the back as quietly as possible. When I go inside, the entire rest of the coven is sitting at a bench in the front. Mary looks up and sees me enter, and she waves me over, gesturing that there is a spot on the bench left for me if I wanted to join them. But with this feeling of utter loneliness and them not really needing me, I just go and stand at the back of the church. I'm not there because I believe in God or anything that's being preached. I'm there to support the pastor. The reason I have been at the sermon every single week so far, to support him. But as I look up to him right now, standing in front and preaching, I feel this pit in my stomach at the knowledge that despite what he may tell me, he doesn't actually need me, and we won't be having a future together. The sermon that was given was very interesting, by the way, because at a certain point, the pastor started preaching about the unnatural sides affecting the town in a very subtle way, but it was still interesting that once he, for example, mentioned hunger, that you saw these dark unnaturals turn to each other and say, "Are you hearing this?" If you are curious to know what that sermon sounded like, Wex, the player of the pastor, did put his sermon up online, so I will put a link here to go check that out if you're inclined. But I am standing at the back of the church, just listening and observing, when an old lady approaches me. It's someone I had never talked to before, but she holds out her hand to me and opens it to show that on her palm is written an arrow and saying, Mrs. Lynn. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Lynn are the ones who own the general store in town, but I had never had any interactions with them before, so my first reaction is to think that she has the wrong person, and I need to ask her like 3 times what she means, to which she actually quietly, finally whispers, "You and your girls are needed." Having said that, she leaves me there to ponder for a moment, and I'm actually quite torn in all of this. On the one hand, it feels pointless to fight still. It's all pointless. This town is going to burn either way. We can't truly save it. But then on the other hand, it's not like the pastor up there preaching right now needs me in this moment. He doesn't. As I said, I'm alone, so that doesn't matter either. And in that moment of internal conflict, I decide if I am alone and if it's all pointless either way, I might as well keep fighting. So I stand up from the table I was leaning against and leave on my own. Because as I said, the found family that I had, the coven, we're scattered. We've broken apart. When the message came for me and my girls, well, there are no my girls anymore. We're not a group anymore. We're shattered. Everyone is doing their own thing. I fast walk out of the church and towards the general store, where it turns out there is this kind of resistance meeting in this very small store, I might add. There's about 15 people all hunched into this small general store, and the meeting is led by the Comanche people, namely Paraibo and Yurako. This is a meeting of all the people who are aware and willing to fight to get back balance in this town. And the way we decide to go about that is by trying to negotiate with the unnatural sides. Everyone chimes in with what side they will go and talk to, try to negotiate with, and the meeting concludes there. At a certain point, someone rushes into the doorway and says, "The sermon is over, everyone is leaving the church, so we should scatter out one by one to not make it too obvious that we were all here and that a meeting was happening." Very fun moment, but I myself, feeling as alone as I am, I just start heading for the door. I will be helping, I will be fighting, but I'll do it on my own. As I go and head for the door though, Paraibo stops me and asks, if we can speak. We both go outside of the general store, and we had never had a private conversation before. He starts by saying he's happy she was there, to represent the Coven, that she is persevering, and that he can see how wise she truly is, even if no one else will see it. I start getting a little emotional there, and I tell him that I'm not there representing the Coven because there is no more Coven. I am alone, and I am floating away, and that is okay. It's pointless, but I'll still fight as long as I just also float away. As I'm sitting there, Paraibo goes down on one knee in front of me, and this very parental posture comes over him. He smiles at me so gently in that moment, as he says that I can't float away. He won't let me, but also I just can't. This town needs me. I tell him that the Coven is drifting apart, to which he says that it wasn't fair to put all of this on her shoulders, but that weight was there regardless, and that I had to be strong and be there, and I wouldn't be alone, because in that room right there were others who would not leave me alone, who would fight with me and show that people still cared. Tears in my eyes, I told him that I felt alone, and he put a hand on my knee and said that I wouldn't be alone. Breaking away from this unexpectedly very emotional moment, I see that the tea party of the Covenant ladies has started just outside of the pavilion. I walk over there, and almost immediately Mary and Gisela spot me and try to get me in a conversation. I immediately hit them with the fact that they don't have to talk to me anymore. There's no group obligation, they're free of my presence, they can do whatever it is they want to do, but they don't have to talk to me anymore. It's all fine, I'm floating away, and they should just let me float. I tell them that nothing matters anymore because the town and all of its inhabitants are going to die because of people's selfish actions. And no one would care if I floated away. Not them, and not even the pastor. So it's fine. Clearly noticing they're not going to get through to me in that moment, Mary only leaves me with the warning, and she says that if anyone offers me lunch at this moment, I shouldn't accept it. Because apparently this fucked up thing happened where people were organizing this cookout and apparently serving human flesh. Human meat lunch? Anyway, not really listening to anything they have to say, I leave and I go grab a cup of tea. I spot the sheriff out of the corner of my eye and I walk over to him with my little cup. Late last night, I had seen him talk to some snake oil sellers, and I go up to him and I warn him, hey, this person that you talked to last night, they're also not good, but they are like the hungry, selfish type of not good, the dark corruption type of not good. So also be wary when you're talking to them. He starts having this crisis moment of just not knowing who he can trust anymore in this town. And honestly, it's so confusing for him, where I have this feeling of knowing if someone is influenced and corrupted. He doesn't have that. And so he only has me walking up to him every now and then telling him, hey, this person that you just had a decent conversation with, they're not the same person you used to know anymore, and they are far gone, or they even sold their soul to one of these forces trying to control the town. I stick around for a moment trying to comfort him, and in that moment, the pastor approaches the both of us. As the sheriff takes his cue and leaves, the pastor asks me why I suddenly had to leave and if I am alright. I honestly do tell him that I left because there was this resistance type of meeting for people who wanted to fight for the balance of the town, and that it was important for me to be there, but also he didn't need me at the sermon. At a certain point in this conversation, he mentions that he was held up in church after the sermon because some locals came and offered him lunch. He mentions getting lunch from the cookout by Dahlia, and I start telling him in the politest way, well, you know how in your scriptures they talk about sharing the body of Christ? Well, you share the body, just not that of Christ. And he's like, what are you trying to tell me? Like, what are you talking about? And I tell him, yeah, you ate human flesh. There was human in that lunch. The color drains from his face as he knows and realizes I'm not the type to lie about this kind of stuff. I ask him, how long ago did you eat that? And he says, well, about 10 minutes ago. And I just hold up 2 fingers and I say, well, I'm pretty sure it can still come out behind that shed over there. He nods palely and leaves for a second behind the shed as I hear some make-believe puking sounds. Good riddance of that lunch. As he comes back from behind that shed, he notices that I am acting even stranger than usual, and he asks if I'm alright. I tell him that I left the sermon because he doesn't need me. It's clear that his sister needs him, and he needs his sister so terribly much, and they should just focus their attention and energy on that. He doesn't need me. I'm floating away once again, and I tell him, let me go. He doesn't seem convinced by anything I just said and tries to show that he does need me, but I don't want to hear any of it, and I walk away. I leave him in that moment. I would say that a few peaceful hours passed then in the town, but they weren't quite peaceful. Change was happening, and people were getting enticed to give up more and more of themselves. As temptation was whispered in their ears, the promises of everything they wanted handed to them on a platter, if only they gave their soul for it. Getting more and more desperate, at a certain point the Coven decides to meet once again to discuss what they can do, and reluctantly, I decide to go along, even if I don't believe that there is a Coven to speak about anymore. As the Coven all sits down together, I start talking to them about the resistance meeting that happened earlier that morning. But already I had started noticing that there is no negotiating with these unnatural sides. And I use these metaphors to say that, well, we're all drinking this polluted water, but the water sources are what we should handle, but we can't possibly be handling the water sources, so we need to find a way that we can maybe have a little bit of pollution inside of us that balances and evens out. Basically getting this idea that maybe if we balance corruption coins inside of ourselves, get 8 corruption coins of each type, we might be balanced. Outgame, I knew this was a total bad idea, but in-game, I was desperate. I'm not making sense to them at all, even less so than normally. So they pull this amazing move where they give me a railroad spike to hold, and they say, magically you're now being influenced to be a little bit more present in your head than otherwise, and speak a little bit more clearly as far as Naomi can, for 10 seconds as long as you're holding the spike. They hit me with the magical Adderall. So as they time for 10 seconds, I explain a little bit more clearly to them that basically negotiating with these unnaturals is going nowhere and we need to find some kind of other solution to go about saving the town. With that information in mind, they do agree that maybe finding balance inside of ourselves isn't the worst idea. So I take that plan and I go forward with it. As I go and sit on the little pavilion on the crossroads once more, I am approached by Cynthia Maxwell. Where I was previously talking with this wild, unnatural being that was sitting on the pavilion as well, Cynthia approaches me and asks basically if what I did for her last night, if I could do that again, but also take that corruption and put it inside someone else who wanted it. I want to help Cynthia so bad because I know she's fighting and she was at that resistance meeting before, but that's not something I'm able to do. So I tell her that I could take it, but I can't just give it to someone else. This wild, unnatural being called Eve, who was sitting on the pavilion, starts talking into Cynthia how she can help and she could do that if she was willing. And I warn Cynthia to not make a deal with this person and to please just, I can see what I can do, but I can't help right now, but please just don't make a deal with this unnatural being. Cynthia accepts that answer and leaves for now. Left there, alone, sitting on the pavilion, Gisela joins me and sits down with me, and she seems just as hopeless as I do in that moment. She asks me how I'm doing and also says that she thinks she understands how I feel a lot more than she used to. We have a beautiful bonding moment right then and there about saying how we both actually feel so alone in everything right now, in not just the Coven but the way the town is going, and also saying that we don't want things to be going the way they are right now. We don't like it actually, and we just want to get closer again. We want to have a bond again, have a family again, the way we used to, the way I felt like I had when everyone was starting to get involved in this proposal stuff with the pastor and me. I felt like everyone was uniting for a second, and we both just agreed that we want that again, more than anything. And we're both still willing to fight for it. We end that heartwarming conversation there, with Gisela saying she finally understands me. She's not just listening to me, but she understands what I'm saying, which just means so incredibly much to me in that moment. And it breaks through those feelings of loneliness. It creates a crack for me to realize that maybe I won't be alone in this fight. And maybe I also haven't been the fairest towards others who clearly do have intentions to keep me around, and they do need me. We are pulled away because, well, during the tea party, one of the things that the pastor had asked or mentioned was that he was going to perform this exorcism ritual on someone else as preparation for when he needed to on his sister, because we had found out that there was something horribly wrong with her. Possibly she was demonically possessed, and he had said that he needed me there for this ritual that he would perform on Lydia Wolf, who was someone else who was dealing with a family curse. Back then, I had told him, you don't need me, but he had insisted that he would appreciate me and any of the Coven members being present for that. So Gisela, Mary, and myself go into the church as it is time for this ritual to happen. We witness Lydia Wolf kneeling down in front of the pastor, and the pastor starting to recite words from a book as Meredith draws symbols on her arm and starts whispering to Lydia. Everything suddenly starts going awry as the pastor almost seems to metaphysically be hit. He stumbles back and sits down on the pews as Meredith keeps drawing these symbols, whispering, clearly corrupting whatever ritual and exorcism was happening and making it dark, making it corrupted. I notice what is going on, but I know that I have no power to stop whatever is happening. So I decide that indeed I have been unfair, and I stand up, walk over to the pews, and sit down next to the pastor. As we witness what is happening, where Meredith's whispers start getting louder and louder, and suddenly Lydia vomits blood out onto the floor as she convulses, clearly something bad happening right now. I comfort the pastor, and I sit there with him, watching, knowing that this is shattering his world, but telling him it's not his fault. He says that he failed the town, and I tell him he didn't. All of this is just not in his power. That's okay. He's helping in any way he can, but this is not his fault. He was simply used in the plans of something bigger than him, ironically enough. I point to the book that they use, and I ask him, do you actually know where this book came from? To which he replies, well, Meredith got it. I don't actually know where it came from. And that dawns on him, and he realizes and asks, my sister's truly gone, isn't she? And I tell him that grieving the person she was isn't that bad right now, but he shouldn't give up, and he most certainly shouldn't lose himself. Lydia starts getting up and cleaning herself up as the ritual ends, sitting down on those pews right there, the sunlight peeking through the slats of this wooden church, shining on our faces. The pastor looks at me and says, well, if times are really as bad as you say they are, there's no time like the present. Do you want to stand up for me? I'm a little confused at first, and I say, well, sure, I will. And I stand up for him, clearly oblivious to what he's about to do, but others in the room knowing exactly what he is intending to. He goes down on one knee in front of me and proposes to me right there in the church. This brings those butterflies back for me, and a smile comes onto my face as it is interrupted by Meredith storming out of this church, furious clearly at what is happening. I accept the proposal, and he slips the ring onto my finger. And in that happy moment, I realize that, again, I'm not alone in this. There are clearly people who need and want me with them, and I will stay with them and fight until the end. Even if this town burns down and we only have today, even if it's pointless, I will keep fighting with the people I love beside me. The sweet moment is brought back to reality as Mary, left in the church with the two of us, asks me if I know what I'm agreeing to. I very bluntly tell her the explanation I got from Gisela when I asked, well, what does marriage entail? And I tell her, I know what I'm getting into. I'm promising to be with the pastor in the eyes of the state and God, but both are things I don't believe in, so it's fine. It's clearly important to him, so that's why it also matters to me. And I like being around him, I like spending time with him, and I want to do so way more in the future. So yeah, I know. Mary says that's not quite right, and if I agree to marry the pastor, it basically means that I become his property in the eyes of the authorities. If he were to do anything to me, it would be in his right to, because once a woman marries a man, she becomes his property in these times. To put it very crudely, a lot of violence was happening outside of the town so far. If he were to go out into the town and also enact violence upon me, there was nothing I or anyone could do because it was in his rights as a husband. A terrible but true reality that Mary is trying to make clear to me, but me being me, I don't see the problem in it because I say, well, if he does anything I don't like, I just leave him. Mary and the pastor have a bit of a standoff there, where the pastor is clear and honest about all of this. He says that Mary is speaking the truth, but he also insists that he would, one, never do such a thing, and two, if he were to ever lose himself so much to become such a man, that our private Bible study group would have something to say about that for sure. Mary yields and walks away, leaving the two of us alone in the church in that moment. As we are left standing there, the pastor asks me if he can do anything to help me right now. With everything that's going on in the town right now, he wants to share the burden that I am carrying in any way that he can. I tell him about the idea of finding balance within ourselves, and maybe that is a way to save this town and ourselves. Well, he agrees to help, and I set about giving him some of the corruption inside of me. Again, he has never been involved in anything surrounding this, so I tell him, open your mouth for me, and this won't be pleasant, as I once again describe to him how now a snake from me goes out of my throat and inside of him, nestling inside, and us sharing this burden, as I share 2 wild corruption coins with him. We both go outside, where Hilda finds us and gathers everyone. Apparently, she's decided that we will be inducting some men into the Coven for the very first time. See, the pastor had talked to Hilda, and Hilda had told him that if he wanted to do right by Naomi, he would join the Coven, to which he, surprisingly enough, agreed. So I don't have anything against that. Rather, this feels like an attempt to make a new found family, make something that works. So I gladly help with the ritual, and we gather the 2 Mullins boys and the pastor in this ritual to start inducting them in front of the crossroads into our coven. The pastor drinks of this concoction. Randy drinks of this concoction, but once it gets to James, Annalise slaps the cup out of his hands and says that he is too corrupted and too far gone to join the Coven. That if he joins, she's going to leave because she can't have an individual like him join us. We all start arguing with her a little bit, and we say that we want James to be in the Coven with us, but I truly try to sense just how corrupted and how influenced James truly is. And I tell you, he reaches into his pants pocket and he holds out this hand with just a pile of corruption coins on it. I swear, I think it was like 12 corruption coins on there. So I stifle a laugh at the fact that he is indeed very corrupted, but continue by saying, well, it's not because he's corrupted that he can't be part of us and help us. A lot of the members inside this coven right now are corrupted as well. But Annalise isn't hearing any of it. And James also starts defending and saying that he doesn't want to intrude and that he can keep fighting the good fight on his own as he has always. And he will keep fighting, he will keep supporting us, but clearly if one of the Coven members doesn't want him inside the Coven right now, he won't intrude and he will just back off. And he starts walking away. I feel bad for him because he truly wants to do the good thing. And I truly believe that he has just been so corrupted and influenced because he's trying to help. in a similar way that I am also getting a little bit more corrupted by just trying to help other people. As the pastor and Randy are inducted into the Coven, Mary and Alice start walking away. I stop them for a second and I ask them where they're going. I even say, "Oh, if you're walking away, I'll walk with you." They both have this kind of sad smile on their faces almost as they tell me that I can't walk with them, but they do want to say goodbye. I'm not fully getting what they're meaning in the moment right there, but they were saying their goodbyes from the Coven slowly and at their own pace because they had chosen a different path. And it was becoming clearer and clearer to me that this original found family that I had, this Coven around me, was truly crumbling, even as it was just starting to rebuild at the same exact time. Hilda seemed corrupted by some kind of demon influence. Mary was happily walking into the darkness herself, and Alice was enticed by the idea of freedom in the wilds. And then that gong hits 3 times, signifying that night is falling, and that doesn't bode well for any of us. A little bit earlier, the Comanche people had already asked anyone who wanted to help bring balance to the town to be present at this big ritual where we would ask guidance from the crossroads. And that is exactly what would be happening now, since our powers were also stronger during nighttime. As I walk over to the ritual site, just before entering, I spot Mary, and I stop her and ask her if she's going to join me in the ritual. Mary says she won't. And that just hits something in Naomi. It makes her realize that this is the last moment she can try to cling on to Mary before she actually is lost to her. Naomi looks at Mary and sees that she still has her soul. So in a last moment of desperation, Naomi rushes to Mary and pulls this darkness outside of her, the smoke filling her lungs and going out of Mary's mouth into Naomi's mouth as she tries to take this corruption from her. Knowing that she can't take all of it, she doesn't have the power to, but at least if she takes some of it, maybe Mary might try and see sense and know that she's not alone. She doesn't have to take the selfish, lonesome path. As Naomi takes this corruption from Mary inside of her, Mary calls her a foolish girl, a foolish but kind-hearted girl. She is shouting at Naomi as the attempt is in vain. And she is shouting at Naomi as the attempt is in vain, because Mary gets up and starts walking away, leaving Naomi with knowledge that she has truly lost one of her sisters. There is a big group of people gathered to do this ritual, to ask the crossroads for guidance, and as we all stand in this circle, I take off my shoes, trying to connect to the earth beneath me even more, as Urako leads this ritual, asking the crossroads for answers, for guidance, for a sign. We want to help, we just feel so powerless. And in this ritual, something truly cruel but necessary happens, and Paraibo, the elder who had supported me and given me all these kinds of words, plunges himself onto a blade as a sacrifice to the crossroads, bleeding out and dying for this ritual and for this last attempt that we're trying to make here. I start sobbing and crying, and Urako does the same, but she keeps strong, and eventually the crossroads answer in the form of the man in black coming and talking to us. We plead to him, but he makes everyone who has corruption in their souls go down in pain, showing only Urako and Gisela left standing. Clearly the only individuals who don't have any corruption in their soul. He starts going around asking individuals what they did to corrupt their souls. They all speak up, but it's not enough for him. I desperately speak up and I tell him I was just using what he gave me to help others. But he said he never gave me that, and continues on. A moment of hope does happen though, because in that moment, Gisela and Urako get the ability to take corruption away from those who give it willingly, fully cleanse whatever influences over them, and distribute it back into the earth towards the unnatural forces it belongs to. This is a small sliver of hope that we have right now, and we go around making plans to try and find as many people as we can who willingly want to give up the corruption that's inside their souls. Already in this circle, people start lining up with Urako and Gisela to get their corruption taken away from them. Mind you, this is not an easy task. It hurts every single time you do it, and it doesn't feel good or right, but you know you have to for the sake of the town. From there, we have a plan. We want to try and find anyone who hasn't sold their soul yet. But as I run out into town, there is madness and chaos happening. People are laughing, dancing, but not in a good, festive way. They seem mad. They look different. These horrific creatures with chains, sharp teeth protruding from their mouths, horns there, black blood coming from their mouths. These are creatures, and I'm surrounded by them completely in this more and more desperate attempt. Surely we can't be the only ones with this little handful of people we have that just haven't sold their soul yet. Surely there must be more out there. And I find James Mullins. I look at him and I see that he still has his soul, a very corrupted one at that, but he still has it. I walk up to him. I say that there is a fighting chance, but for that he has to come with me right now, and he has to give his corruption up willingly. He seems a bit taken aback by this, but he seems kind of on board with it, but just says that there is one more thing he needs to do, but asks me to stay right here and wait for him right there, and in a moment he'll come with me. But first he needs to do something. I stay there and I watch in horror as the thing that he is supposed to still do turns out to be him and 7 other people blindly beating up a guy until his death, with the judge, this unnatural being of light, standing in front of them screaming, "This is justice. This is no justice." And I am staring, mouth agape, in horror at all of this happening in front of me right now. As this scene ends, James comes back over to me and I tell him, "Well, I waited for you, but you need to come with me." And he seems a little reluctant. He starts murmuring about how he just needs one more moment, and I snap. Probably the first time I raised my voice to anyone, and I tell him there are no more moments. There is no more one moment for him to take. He needs to come with me if he wants to fight right now and go to Gisela and give up his corruption willingly, because that is the only way he can still fight for this town that he loves and not lose it in flames. And these words seem to hit him. In that moment, we realize that even if our interactions have been few, they've been impactful so far. And he values the chance I'm giving him right now, the fight I'm putting up for him, to save him, to not get him to lose his soul. And he agrees, and he walks off to Gisela, willingly giving up the corruption that's taken hold of his soul. As I go back to walking around this chaos-filled town, I spot the ghost of Paraibo a little bit further off, and as we cross paths, I feel this need to speak to him. Almost no one can see him except for me, and I tell him, "We're trying." No, wait, actually, I hate that. We're doing it. I promise we're doing it. And I walk off trying to find more people who just haven't sold their soul yet. And one of the most heartbreaking moments happens right then and there, where I see Cynthia Maxwell walking up to me, holding a skull in her hands, crying. As she walks up to me, she's constantly saying, "It's my boy, they killed my boy." I realize that the skull she's holding right now is the skull of her dead son. And apparently the Saloon of Lost Dreams was behind killing him, so they thought it would be fun to hand her the skull. I take her with me and sit down. I know that in this moment I can't sympathize a lot with her because, well, I'm trying to save the town, and she's one of the people I'm desperately trying to save. I talk into her, I tell her she can't lose herself. That thing she's holding, that skull, it's not her boy. It used to be, but it's not her boy anymore. And she can't let them win. She can't let them control her and let her lose herself. She has to try to be stronger for this town. But I don't have a lot of time that I can spend with her in that moment. And sadly enough, after some comforting, I do have to leave her. This nagging feeling in the back of my mind that despite my continuous efforts in trying to help Cynthia, she was already lost and there was nothing I could do about it anymore. As I'm walking around, desperately trying to sense more people who still had their souls, I noticed at least twice the pastor having conversation with an unnatural and them trying to influence him, use their gifts on him to influence his mind. Luckily, I catch this twice, and I have this very fun scene where I basically rush in, push him behind me, point at the unnatural in the face, and say, "Get out of his head! We don't want you here in our town." I'll say, it's a very powerful move, but I felt very powerless in that moment because while I got into their face about it, I had no way of defending myself whatsoever if they tried anything on me. I was powerless in that moment, but in some way that powerlessness made me feel so empowered in making these bold moves because, well, I was sick of these unnatural beings walking around this town, destroying it like they owned it, like they were welcome here. I wanted them to know they were not welcome here. They were this sick corruption that was spreading and infesting this town, but they were not natural. And we would keep fighting until the bitter end to hold on to ourselves. I tried to talk to people. I tried to tell them that the town they would want, the town that they loved, would only be back if they were there to help build it. And it would only be there if they were still human. They shouldn't sell their souls. We needed them. The town needed them to rebuild and become better. But sadly, as I looked around, I started to realize that there weren't a whole lot of souls left to save. In all of this happening, the pastor approached me and he had made it clear that he intended to do an exorcism on his sister, who clearly indeed was demon possessed. He was sure he could help her, but he needed to get to her to do this exorcism. I promised to help and we tried to gather some people to help, but as we tried to walk towards where his sister was, Mary got in the way. Mary had apparently gotten married to Meredith. She has good family taste, but still, this was quite a surprise. We try to get past Mary, and as the pastor pushes closer, Mary takes her cigarette and puts it on the pastor's chest after hitting him in the face. That makes me yell at Mary and tell her to stop what she's doing. I point at the bracelet on her arm and I tell her that clearly she does not care about family anymore, so she should just take that off. It doesn't mean anything anymore. And Mary responds by saying that Naomi is the only reason she's showing the pastor as much mercy as she is right now. Clearly we're not getting past Mary, who is unnaturally strong right now, and I urge the pastor to retreat for now. And at that exact moment, Yurako also comes barging out of the general store, handing these cans of beans to everyone, which apparently these cans were made out of cold iron, which repels all of the unnatural beings from us. I take one of these cans and I take the pastor's hand and we start running towards the one place that apparently was still safe for us, the music hall. A handful of us gather in this music hall. We close doors. Apparently for some reason, perhaps the crossroads was on our sides. The unnatural beings couldn't cross the barrier of this music hall. So we were safe in here for now from all the chaos happening outside in our beloved town. While we are safe in here right now, we are trapped essentially. Unnatural beings start knocking on the doors and all the walls around us outside, tempting us to go out, urging us to invite them inside, and whispering everything they could to try and get us to sell our souls to them. In this boldness that I'm feeling in that moment, I go up to the wall and at some point an unnatural is talking to me. In this moment, the ghost of Paraibo suddenly whispers to me and he says, "Naomi, the window." And I tell him, "Window? What window?" Because I'm used to metaphors rather than actual words. And he says, "No, Naomi, the window. Luckily, he told me, because as I look up towards one of the windows, there is a hand from someone inside trying to latch onto the window and try and get it to open fully so they can crawl inside. I take the shovel from someone else, walk up to that window, and I just start smashing it on and saying, "Stay out! We don't want you in here." It was a great moment, and also a great interaction again with Paraibo, where even if he was dead, he was still around helping us. Things are still desperate though, and we're trying to see what we can still do with the small group inside. And in that moment of desperation, Gisela looks at the pastor and me and asks, "Do you want to get married?" There is no hesitation for either of us, as we agree that if these moments would be our last, we would like to spend them together in the promise that we would make to each other. Right there, stuck in that music hall, with unnaturals banging at the doors, yelling for us to come outside, we get married in a witch's hand fasting led by Gisela. We give our vows to one another, where he promises to stand beside me and be there for me no matter what comes next. And I tell him in my vows that, well, giving our souls away is a bad thing and we shouldn't do that as humans. But what we can do is give our soul a resting place, and that I would happily be a resting place for his soul, and he in turn could be a resting place for my soul. We seal it with a kiss, and in that moment, we, against all odds, got married. The bliss of this moment doesn't last that long, because about 15 minutes later, the pastor hears a voice outside of the door. His sister. Meredith starts talking to him, and he opens the door and suddenly drags her inside. He starts holding her as she is convulsing and writhing on the floor, and he decides to give the exorcism a shot. We try and hold her down, but she uses her influence to make us scared, make us run away as fast as we can. Only the pastor is able to stay with her through all of this. The desperation so clear in the words that he is saying as he is trying to save his sister. At a certain point, I just reach out and push his Bible a little closer to him. And fittingly enough, ever since the pastor proposed to Naomi had hung this rosary around the belt of her dress as a kind of symbolization of their union. It's very fitting then that in that moment, as I push the Bible closer to him, the rosary breaks and falls onto the ground away from my waist. I decide that this is a moment they share and they need each other in, so I go and sit a little bit further on one of the benches and just watch and wait. At a certain moment, the chanting stops. I see him reach up and take his collar, rip it off, take his rosary, leave it on the table with his Bible. There is defeat in his eyes and extreme sadness as he looks down at the floor and starts walking towards me. I already feel what is coming, yet I let him walk up to me, tears in his red eyes, as he just says, "Sorry I wasn't strong enough for you." And almost as if he can't bear looking at me any longer, he says, "I need to go with her. She needs me, and I need to go with her." And that is all he says as he starts walking away towards his sister. They clasp hands, they walk towards the door, and I'm left sitting there, feeling this intense dread and despair as I call out to him. The first time I even actually said his name, I call out Joseph, but he doesn't respond. And as he gets closer to that door, as his hand reaches that door and opens it, I call out one last time and I ask, "Joseph," wanting him to at least turn around and look at me again, but he doesn't, as if he can't allow himself to. He doesn't look behind him, and he walks out of the door with his sister, door going shut again behind them. I look up from the bench and I see Paraibo's ghost in front of me. And as tears fill my eyes in that moment, and one of my hand reaches out to take off the ring from my finger, put it in my bag. I tell him, "You told me I wouldn't be alone." And quietly in that moment, I bawl my eyes out as the person I had learned to care for so much, I thought would be my anchor in all of this that's happening right now, left me. Not even 15 minutes after getting married to them, they left. And this feeling of hopelessness and loneliness threatens to overcome me. And it could have swallowed me whole in that moment. I could have given in, and I could have decided that it was all just not worth it anymore. I could have gotten up and walked outside of those doors and just given in, because maybe I was truly just intended to be alone, and this was all just suffering lengthened out and stretched into eternity. But one thing stopped me from giving in, and it was Gisela, who sat down next to me on the bench and just took a hold of one of my hands. And in that moment, I knew that I wasn't alone, because the bond I had with Gisela, it meant even more than anything else could in this moment. And that would be my anchor. We spend a good 20 minutes there, still stuck in that music hall. Still no way or idea of how to get out. We pace, we try and open the door, we try and talk. There's nothing there. At a certain point, as we are pacing in this music hall, getting desperate, hopeless, the back door suddenly open and two people stumble in. At that moment, I myself am at the front door, so I don't notice until someone tells me, "Naomi, your man is back." I turn around and I look at the back door, and there he is. Meredith and Joseph sitting on the floor, looking disheveled as all hell, but there. And the moment I look at them deeper, I see that they both have their soul stills. They're very corrupted, but they're both human. There's no demon in Meredith anymore, and Joseph seems very corrupted, but he also still has a soul. And I walk up, a feeling of confusion coming over me. I hadn't expected to ever see them again, but in this moment, I slipped my ring back onto my finger, thinking, well, I'm married again, I guess. I don't know what to make of the situation, but as I get closer, Gisela tells me he doesn't want to give up his corruption to her. He doesn't want to burden anyone else with it. I shake my head at this, and I just think, I'll help. And so I tell him I'll take it from him. He's very adamant at me not taking it from him, and I tell him, just open your mouth, please. He refuses. He grasps my hand, and I tell him that's good enough to start with. In our connection in that moment, I take corruption from him, but I can't take it all. And in a almost symbolical way there, we're left sharing the corruption that's in him. Him still carrying some of it, and me carrying some of it in me. I stand with him and Meredith in a moment, and they explain how they did go out, but they weren't accepted by the darkness. Outgame, I can tell you that they both went to the darkness, the fire, to give their souls into it, but apparently the darkness didn't want either of them, because their reasons for being there was that the other person needed them. A selfless act, and darkness was all about selfish acts. So when they both talked and spoke about their intentions, the darkness said that there was no place for them, and it spat them out, making them crawl their way back to the music hall, still human, despite all odds. They explained some of this to me, and I just support Meredith in that moment. She has been through quite a lot, and I tell her that she won't be alone anymore, that she'll have a home with us, she'll be allowed to stay with us, and she won't be alone. She gives me the ring that she'd gotten from Mary when they got married, and she asks me if I can return it to Mary. I tell her I'll help. I'll do that for her. Once back inside, we get a visit from the man in black, the crossroad itself finally speaking to us in our moment of true desperation. He puts it plainly. He tells us that in 10 minutes, a path will open, safe passage from here towards the crossroads, the center of town. From there, we will get one path of safe passage outside of the town. and away. He tells us that when we leave, the town will burn down to ashes. But in time, maybe we'll get a chance to come back and rebuild it from the ashes. It's incredibly bittersweet to hear your fate be laid out to you plainly, and we can do nothing but accept it in that moment. We don't have any way to fight anymore. This is the only chance we get to still be us. So, when the time comes, that door opens, and we walk out towards the center of town in this single row as we gather in this pavilion. But before I reach the pavilion, the unimaginable happens. Namely, during our time stuck in the music hall, news had come to us at some point that both of the Mullins boys had died, apparently. And yes, we were very distraught about that. So imagine my surprise when I walk out going towards this pavilion and I spot James there, looking at him and seeing that he still has his soul. He's very corrupted, but he has his soul, and he hasn't become an unnatural. I am baffled by the fact that he is still alive, but that he still has his soul and he didn't sell it. I walk up to him and he looks disheveled, he looks hurt, but he is still James. And I take his hand, and in his wonderment, I just ask him, "Do you want a hug?" We hug James, and in that moment, I feel like I've given found family to someone in the way that I had always wanted it as well. And I've shown him that if he keeps pushing through, he'll never be alone. Even if sometimes it feels like it, he'll always have a place and a person to return to. And he's part of the Coven now, whether he wants to or not. Outgame, Sam had told me later on that Naomi was actually the only reason he managed to survive, because the moment I convinced him to give up his corruption willingly, it cleared his soul of all of this influence. And later on, when he was stuck outside of the music hall fighting for his life, someone shot him and he was mortally wounded. He managed to drag himself into the Saloon of Lost Dreams and there made a deal with the Fey Prince to save his life. In that deal, he got corrupted by the wild, but since his soul had previously been cleared of corruption, he was able to take this and still remain himself. Whereas, if he hadn't cleared his soul, that would have pushed him to sell his soul to the wild side and become an unnatural. This is crazy to me, and leads to one of the most beautiful sentences to come out of this game for me. We didn't get to save the town, but we saved who we were and the relationships we made along the way. So holding his hand, Gisela and I take James to the pavilion with us. And as we are standing there, just before the man in black describes what we see of our town and what happens, holding James's hand, Gisela and I take him to the pavilion with us. As we're standing there, on the other side, in the shadows, I spot Mary standing on the opposite side of me. I lift the hand with the wedding ring on it. I point at it as I wave to her, and she holds up the wedding ring she got back, apparently, from Hilda, to whom I gave it. She holds it up, points to it, and gives me just this wave. A motion of saying goodbye and knowing that we're never going to see each other again. But we took our own paths in it, and this is probably one of the saddest goodbyes I had. Just before the man in black tells us how the story ends, I turn around and look at Joseph. I take his hand and I ask him, "Remind me that I'm hungry?" And he responds with, "Every day. It's not so bad having anchors now and then, keeping you where you're supposed to be and keeping you true to yourself." The way the story ends is exactly how the man in black described it. As we left Covenant, we saw the town dance and party and burn all the way to ashes. As we split ways for a moment, Joseph, Meredith, and I going to Corpus Christi to spend a few days there. We all knew that eventually we would see each other again, because we would all be coming back to Covenant when the time was right to rebuild. But that rebuilding was just going to be without some of the people we had wanted there with us. But that's alright. We were still us, and we were still human, and the human soul prevailed. That is the very impactful story that I got to experience at Coven 1934. This emotionally deep LARP about human nature and what it does in the face of oppression and corruption, and just how far you can go before you lose yourself and you break. A story about desperation and hopelessness, but somehow finding power still in that hopelessness because you're human. And it was such a good story. So with that, all that's left for me is to just thank all of my fellow players, the lovely people at Jackalope who invited me to come over as a creator and get to experience this amazing story with them, this amazing event all together with them. It wouldn't have been the same without the lovely players who shared the story with me, who made it as impactful as it was, who made it as safe to go so emotionally hard and calibrated with me every step of the way to come to this beautiful conclusion. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. And to you, thank you so much for listening and sticking through until the end of this video. I realize it's definitely a longer one, but I feel like it's worth it because the story just deserves to be told. And I hope this inspires you to maybe try out your own LARP, or maybe try and seek that story that you wish to live through at some point. With that, stay human and stay safe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!